Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really unsettling case you brought us. The murder of Kay Parsons.
Yes, in Grovetown, Georgia, back in 2009.
We're diving into the narrative, the Kay Parsons murder, a case of betrayal, manipulation, and justice, exploring, well, not just the crime itself, but the dynamics behind it.
Exactly. Betrayal, manipulation.
Yeah.
All happening in this, seemingly normal suburban town.
It really forces you to think, doesn't it, about how sometimes the danger isn't from strangers.
It's right next door, potentially, within your closest circle.
So let's set the scene. Grovetown, Georgia, 2009. You picture it, right? Quiet streets, neighbors know each other.
A typical picture of suburban life.
And Kay Parsons was right in the middle of that community. A wife, a mother, she worked as an X-ray tech.
Highly respected by all accounts.
So imagine the shock on March 25th, 2009, when she's found dead in her own home.
And brutally attacked. With a baseball bat. Just horrific.
The immediate question is just,
Yeah.
how? How does this happen in a place like Grovetown?
The initial details were strange, weren't they?
Yeah, like, no forced entry.
Right. That immediately suggests she likely knew her attacker. Left them in.
And nothing was stolen.
Which rules out, or at least makes a random robbery seem very unlikely. It feels personal, targeted.
And the person who finds her is her close friend, her neighbor, Rebecca Sears.
Kay's husband, David, he called Rebecca. Right. He was worried because Kay hadn't shown up for work.
Which was apparently very unlike her. He couldn't reach her, so he asked Rebecca to check.
And she walks into this absolute nightmare. Makes the 911 call just before 11 a.m.
Sounding panicked, naturally, but the scene itself confirmed a really violent attack.
So the investigation starts, and you're immediately wondering who in Kay's life? Why such rage?
You automatically look at the inner circle in these situations.
Yes. Her husband, David.
Yeah.
Her friend, Rebecca. Their relationships become central very quickly.
It's that chilling thought again, the people you trust the most.
Mm-hmm. Maybe harboring secrets.
Let's talk about Kay herself. Who was she?
Well, the picture painted is of a really good person. Compassionate, reliable.
Worked at Evans Prompt Care, dedicated to her job, devoted to her family, David, and their 12-year-old son.
And this incredibly close friendship with Rebecca Sears. Everyone saw it.
Like sisters, they said.
Almost inseparable. Which makes what comes later even more shocking.
But there were apparently some slight whispers. Kay had mentioned to a few friends some marital tension.
Yeah, nothing specific seemed to have been said, or at least not widely known. Just subtle hints.
Things that maybe didn't seem like huge red flags at the time.
Exactly. But in hindsight, those details often take on new significance, don't they?
Definitely. Especially when you contrast it with that seemingly perfect friendship.
So the crime scene itself, let's go back there. What did investigators find?
Grim details. Kay found unconscious, bludgeoned, significant blood spatter indicating, well, extreme violence.
A very personal, rage-filled attack.
The weapon was confirmed as a metal baseball bat, and crucially, it was brought to the house.
Not something Kay just had lying around for self-defense.
Correct. And again, no forced entry, nothing stolen. It almost looked staged, like a robbery attempt gone wrong, but not really.
The number of blows, the sheer brutality, suggested a determination to kill.
Which reinforces the idea that Kay knew her attacker. Let them in willingly.
And the forensic evidence starts building. A partial bloody footprint.
Unidentified hairs.
And these faint blood droplets leading away from the scene. Little pieces of a puzzle.
Now, Rebecca Sears' arrival and behavior, that caught investigators' attention early on.
It seems so. Reports suggest her behavior felt a little off.
Of how?
Well, like, intensely panicked, yes, but also maybe overly explaining things, giving too many details.
Things that made them think twice, maybe suggested she knew more than she was letting on.
It's a delicate line, of course. People react differently to trauma, but it was noted.
Okay, so let's shift focus to that friendship, Kay and Rebecca, the like-sisters bond.
This is where the case takes a truly dark turn. The hidden reality.
The affair.
Yes. Rebecca Sears was having an affair with Kay's husband, David Parsons.
Wow. That revelation changes the entire context.
Completely. And reports suggested Rebecca wasn't just having an affair. She was obsessed with David.
Viewing Kay as an obstacle.
The obstacle to the life she wanted with David. Suddenly, you have a powerful, deeply disturbing motive.
And it gets even darker, incredibly.
It does. Rebecca didn't act alone, allegedly. She recruited someone else.
Christopher Bowers, 19 years old, a friend of her own son.
And, according to reports, potentially also romantically involved with Rebecca herself.
So she manipulates him. convinces him to carry out the murder.
That was the allegation. The plan involved Bowers using the unlocked back door, something Rebecca likely knew Kay sometimes left unsecured while Kay was home alone.
And Rebecca's role afterward, the 911 call, her presence at the scene.
Now viewed through a completely different lens, potentially rehearsed, part of the cover-up.
The evidence started mounting against them.
Oh, yes. Text messages were crucial. Surveillance footage placed them together in key times. And the forensic links.
It paints this picture of ultimate betrayal. The monster wasn't a stranger. She was literally next door.
A chilling abuse of trust. The planning, the manipulation. It's hard to fathom.
Using the affair as motive, then exploiting this young man, Bowers.
It shows a shocking level of calculation. Knowing Kay's routine, the unlocked door, all pointing to intimate knowledge used for a lethal purpose.
So after Kay tragically dies from her injuries, the case officially becomes a homicide investigation.
And that lack of robbery, the personal nature of the attack, keeps the focus tight.
Suspicion really starts to solidify around Rebecca, based on those interviews, her behavior.
And then the digital evidence breaks it wide open. Those text messages between Rebecca and Christopher Bowers.
That must have been a huge turning point.
Absolutely. Investigators dug into their relationship, phone records, witness accounts. It all started to connect.
Placing Bowers near the scene around the time of the murder.
And then the physical evidence comes in strong.
The footprint matched Bowers.
And crucially, DNA found under Kay's fingernails, likely from her trying to fight back. That DNA matched Bowers.
Undeniable links.
At that point, the pressure on Bowers must have been immense. He eventually confessed.
Admitted to the attack.
Yes, and directly implicated Rebecca Sears as the mastermind. Said she planned it.
And investigators found deleted messages.
Digital forensics recovered them. Messages discussing the plan, the arrangements. It sealed the deal.
Leading to the arrests of both Rebecca Sears and Christopher Bowers.
It's a stark example of how digital footprints can be just as incriminating as physical evidence these days. Those texts provided a narrative, a timeline.
So the case moves to the courtroom. 2 separate trials.
Tense atmosphere you can imagine. First, Christopher Bowers.
What was the prosecution's angle there?
They portrayed him essentially as Rebecca's weapon, someone she manipulated into committing the act.
The forensics, the texts, all laid out for the jury.
Yes. And Bowers himself testified. He spoke about feeling used, manipulated by Rebecca. He recounted the attack, claimed he was just doing what she told him to do.
But he still committed the act.
Exactly. He was found guilty, life sentence, but with the possibility of parole. His cooperation likely played a role in that.
Then Rebecca Sears' trial, a very different scenario, presumably.
Very different demeanor. She maintained her innocence throughout.
But the prosecution had a strong case.
They focused heavily on the affair with David Parsons as the motive. Witness testimony, those suggestive texts.
What did her defense argue?
That she was being framed. That Bowers acted alone or was manipulated by someone else.
But the evidence against her was?
Overwhelming. The circumstantial evidence, the digital trail, Bowers' testimony implicating her.
Despite her denials, the jury convicted her on all counts.
And the sentence reflected the severity, the planning involved. Life without the possibility of parole.
The judge's comments were powerful, weren't they? Calling it the ultimate betrayal.
And premeditation that shocks the conscience. Really emphasizing the calculated nature of her actions compared to Bowers, who, while guilty, was seen partly as her instrument.
The legal system drawing a distinction based on her role as the orchestrator.
Precisely. Holding her ultimately more culpable for the entire scheme.
The aftermath. It must have devastated that community.
Absolutely. For Kay's husband, David. I mean, beyond the grief, there were rumors, social isolation. He had to shield their son.
The impact on their son. It's just unthinkable. Losing his mother in such a brutal way with all this betrayal swirling around.
The community did rally, trying to support him, remembering Kay for her kindness. But the sense of safety was shattered.
And for Rebecca Sears' family.
Shame, social collapse. Their lives turned upside down, too, in a different but also devastating way.
Grovetown's image of peace was broken. Trust between neighbors fractured.
It breeds suspicion, doesn't it? When something like this happens, seemingly out of the blue, within a tight-knit community.
But the narrative also mentioned some resilience. People started talking more openly.
Yes, about difficult subjects. Domestic conflict, betrayal. An increase in people seeking counseling was noted. Maybe a small silver lining, finding ways to process and heal.
And Kay is remembered. There's a small memorial. Her story endures.
Reminder of the human cost, the value of real connection, and the danger of, well, facades.
Let's try to understand the psychology here, specifically Rebecca Sears. The narrative mentions covert narcissism.
It's suggested as a possible lens, that need for admiration, simmering resentment underneath.
The affair wasn't just about David, maybe, but about winning, overcoming Kay.
It could be interpreted that way. A kind of pathological jealousy, where Kay wasn't just a rival, but someone whose life Rebecca felt entitled to take.
And her manipulation of Bowers. How does that fit?
It points to exploiting vulnerability, finding someone perhaps needy for attention or direction, like Bowers might have been, and using flattery or lies.
Turning him against Kay, framing the murder as some kind of solution or necessity.
This ties into the idea of coercive control, not physical abuse necessarily, but psychological domination.
And she fits the profile of a proxy killer, right? Getting someone else to do the dirty work.
Exactly. Orchestrating from a distance, maintaining that facade of innocence initially.
Her reported lack of remorse after conviction? That also seems telling.
It often aligns with narcissistic traits. The focus might be less on the harm caused and more on the injustice of being caught, a sense of entitlement.
Understanding these potential drivers, while not excusing the actions, helps make sense of such unthinkable behavior.
It provides context for the level of manipulation and cold calculation involved.
Legally, this case also brings up some important points.
Definitely. The concepts of conspiracy and party to a crime liability are central.
Meaning Rebecca could be held fully responsible even though she didn't swing the bat.
Correct. Because she planned it, instigated it, made it happen. Her culpability was arguably greater in the eyes of the law.
Bowers' situation was complex too. The claim of coercion.
Yes. But the law still holds you responsible for your actions, even if influenced. His sentence reflected that complexity, acknowledging the influence, but still imposing a severe penalty.
Has this case influenced legal discussions or training?
Reportedly, yes. It serves as a case study in manipulation, shared guilt, and the importance of psychological insight in investigations.
And the need for tech fluency, with the digital evidence being so key.
Absolutely. Modern investigations rely heavily on that now.
There is also public reaction regarding David Parsons, Kay's husband. The fact he faced no legal charges despite the affair.
That often sparks debate, highlighting the difference between what might be considered morally wrong and what is actually illegal. The law punishes criminal acts, not necessarily infidelity.
A difficult distinction for many people to grapple with in cases like this.
Understandably so.
So pulling back, what are the big takeaways, the lessons from this awful story?
Well, it was a stark warning about manipulation, the power it can have, and the importance of maybe recognizing it and having strong emotional boundaries.
It really exposes the vulnerabilities in relationships, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. That betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. It urges awareness, respect, maybe not taking things purely at face value.
And the danger of ignoring red flags, those little hints of trouble.
Definitely. Complacency can be dangerous.
But contrasting all that darkness is the memory of Kay, her strength, her kindness.
And the importance of cherishing genuine connections, not the false ones.
Ultimately, it shows the power of the justice system holding people accountable.
Yes, even in complex cases involving manipulation and conspiracy.
It leaves you thinking about, well, the fragility of life, the deep wounds of betrayal.
And the need to be vigilant in our own lives, examining our relationships, watching for signs of manipulation, hopefully before it escalates.
As we wrap up this deep dive on the Kay Parsons murder, it's a lot to process. That web of relationships, the motivations. What part of this case stands out most to you now?
For me, it's the starkness of the betrayal from someone so close. That neighborly, sisterly bond hiding such deep resentment and plotting. It really makes you question appearances. How does it shape how you see community dynamics?
It absolutely makes you think about trust, doesn't it? And how easily deception can operate right under the surface. It prompts that question. What boundaries do we need? How do we tell real connection from something else?
It's a vital question. Differentiating genuine care from manipulative control is key.
The details here are shocking, but they do offer these tough insights into behavior, psychology, the law. Maybe it encourages us all to learn more about coercive control, healthy relationships.
Recognizing those warning signs could be incredibly important. There are resources out there.
Thank you for joining us on this very difficult deep dive.
May Kay Parsons' story, tragic as it is, serve as that reminder, value the real connections and stay mindful of what might be hidden, even in familiar places.